Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for, what is the date? October 3rd, 2022. Can we have the roll?
Greg Strike.
Here.
Andre Spinelli.
Here.
Jared Gardner.
Here.
Radhika Krishna. Radhika.
Here.
Jeff Ron.
Here.
Brandy Eber.
Here.
Jim Winchester and Scott Pullis are excused. You have a quorum. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda are the minutes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Commissioner Spinelli, seconded by Commissioner Strike. Any objection? Okay, seeing none, that motion passes. Moving on to disclosures, Commissioner Eber,
None to disclose.
Commissioner Strike.
No disclosures.
Commissioner Eber.
I was absent on both the 9/12 and 9/19 meetings, so I abstained from the consent agenda.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Eber, and I appreciate the reminder for myself since I will have a similar disclosure that I otherwise would have forgotten. Commissioner Spinelli.
I think I have nothing to disclose.
Commissioner Ron.
No disclosures.
Commissioner Krishna.
No disclosures.
And for myself, I was absent for case 2022-0090 and will also abstain from voting on that case on the consent agenda. Next item is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Commissioner Strike, seconded by Commissioner Ron. Any objection? Okay, seeing none, that motion passes. And we'll move on to the final item on the agenda, which is unfinished business, case 2021-0127. This was postponed from February 7th, and I'll go ahead, since it's a public hearing item, I'll, just for the record, go ahead and read the procedure by which the public may speak to the commission at its meetings. After the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the commission rules of procedure. Petitioners, including all of his or her representatives, will receive 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. Representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc. will receive 5 minutes. Individuals receive 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes, except commission recommendations to the Assembly which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the resolution, which is the commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. And I guess with that, we thank you, staff, for the information you provided earlier in the informational session. I don't know if there are any other comments or aspects of an initial presentation you'd like to make.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Christine Bunnell, Long Range Planning Manager, and with me on the phone is Daniel McKenna Foster, Senior Planner with Long Range. Daniel is a project manager on this zoning district amendment. Before you is a revised public hearing draft amendment to the R4A zoning district. The R4A is a multifamily residential mixed-use district intended for high-density residential and commercial development by integrating these uses into walkable, transit-accessible places. You wanted us to go back and talk to the public a little bit more after January, and Daniel held several meetings and made presentations at different community councils and with developers. Those included JJ and the Anchorage Community Development Authority. On page 3, at the bottom of page 3 of your packet, is a table that outlines what changes were made. Briefly, development standards were updated and simplified with the intent to do the following, and that is create a more pedestrian-oriented environment to allow more commercial space, again, increasing that to 49%, to simplify commercial versus housing phasing requirements and to overall make the zoning district's requirements easier to follow. No changes to any zoning map are proposed. And I've got a list of who we visited with: Airport Heights, Downtown, Fairview, Midtown, North Star, Rogers Park, South Addition, Spenard, and University area. I think that's all I have, unless there's any more questions, and then Daniel can jump in too.
Thank you. Daniel, do you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be glad to answer any questions. But yeah, it was, we did talk to a bunch of neighborhoods, and we focused on those neighborhoods because those are the ones that had land that was eligible for R4A. I think the only R4A zone land that exists right now in the municipality is, I believe, in Midtown and Spenard. So we focused a lot on Spenard because that's where the most most likely it is that the area will actually be developed. So that's why we had this kind of targeted approach. But again, anything that was going to be rezoned to R4A would go through the normal rezone process. So I think a lot of people we didn't hear a lot of feedback either way, just maybe because it's just sort of an unknown and it hasn't really been tested yet. But I'd be glad to answer any other questions if there are any. Thank you.
I have one question, and I guess to Commissioner Spinelli's discussion point earlier about his concerns about the percentage of commercial and residential. And so I'm looking at page 15 in the packet, and I just wanted to confirm my understanding of how this works if a developer were to want to exceed the 49% for non-residential uses. And am I reading this correctly that it really depends on the dwelling units per acre that will trigger kind of what process takes place, and that if it's above 35, then they just have to go through a conditional use process, and if it's below 35, it's a major site plan review? Is that kind of the branch there? So the difference, there are kind of two issues here. There's the minimum density, the minimum residential density, and the percentage of commercial that's allowed. And so basically, you're always allowed up to 49% commercial. You're also always allowed 100% residential if you wanted to. To go above more commercial, you have to go through a major site plan review, and maybe you do that and you say, okay, I want to do more commercial, but I'm going to provide higher densities. I'll provide 35 dwelling units per acre. Or you do a conditional use and you're also providing 35 dwelling units per acre. Or the small area implementation plan, which is really a more intense process. And again, this was a sticking point, but it really came down to if we allowed more residential by right, it's no longer really a residential zone. And then it's more of maybe just a different type of mixed-use zone or business zone, but it isn't really an R zone then. So that's kind of why we picked 49%, going right to the end. So 51% residential and 49% commercial. But there are these ways. So if somebody says, you know what, I'd really like to do 55% commercial, and they say, but I can put up to 35 dwellings per acre. Great, you do a major site plan review, and that should cover it, or potentially with conditional use. So yeah, and the hard minimum of required 20 dwelling units per acre was again coming from the direction of the commission earlier this year. And it's really just to say, fundamentally, this is really about getting more residential units. So hopefully within that, say, hey, you've got to build at least 20 dwellings per acre, and you can get up to 49%. That's kind of what you can do without any wiggle room. And these other pieces are to get, well, if you're getting more density, it's okay to have a different mix of more commercial than residential, because really it's just about getting those units. And I know that does seem kind of complicated, but it is a simplification from the existing, which is even more complicated. But we just kind of wanted to give sort of some flexibility. So if somebody really can't make it work at 49%, there are ways to do it. But fundamentally, it was really just, can we get this zone to help produce more residential units? And in talking to people, they said, yeah, 49% is pretty flexible. Or it's maybe, and again, we don't know. We're not putting money behind it. But that, of course, would be subject to change. But the rationale behind it was really that we can't really go higher than 49% without it no longer really being a residential zone. But again, that could be a policy decision. Oh, okay, so thanks, Daniel. I guess, I think I heard the answer to my question there. I just wanted to confirm that if you are going above 49%, it's not that there's a branch depending on the dwelling units per gross acre, but you always have to do a major site plan review. And then if, in addition, if you're above 35, you have to have a conditional use layered on top of it?
Yeah, you can kind of pick. If you say, I want to go above 49%, you can pick a major site plan review and do 35 dwelling units per acre, or you can do a conditional use and do 35 dwelling units per acre.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Can I just follow up on that? So with the small area implementation plan, do you have the option of doing over 50% commercial and less than 35 dwelling units per acre?
If I may, through the chair, potentially, yeah. I think the small area implementation plan is really, as I understand it, kind of intended like a fairly serious sort of master planning process for one specific area. So the idea is that in doing that, hopefully, more of the community would be involved, and there'd be a lot more kind of oversight, and you would be able to do it. And actually, I need to correct a previous thing that I said to the chair. Major site plan review if you want to build up to 35 dwelling units per acre. So you say I want to do 50% commercial, or I want to do 55% commercial, and I can build up to 30% or 30 dwelling units per acre. Great, you can do it on a major site plan review. But if you want to go higher, then you can do 35 dwelling units per acre. But yes, to Commissioner Spinelli's question, small area implementation plan has the most flexibility, but it also has the most process and the most oversight. And the idea is that if there are these trade-offs to be made, they can be made with more input from more people. So then, hopefully it would balance those things out.
Okay, seeing nothing pending at the moment, we'll go ahead and go through our process, I guess, and open this up to the public. And I'll just note for the record that there's no one here to testify, and there's no one on the phone scheduled to testify as well. And then I guess we will go ahead and close the public hearing. Okay, so I guess at this point, what's the will of the body? Commissioner Strike.
Thank you. I move in case 2021-0127 to recommend to the Anchorage Assembly approval of an ordinance amending Title 21 Mixed-Use Development Standards in the R4A zoning district.
Thank you, Commissioner Strike, seconded by Commissioner Spinelli. Commissioner Strike, would you like to speak to your motion?
I would. First off, again, thank you to the staff for the prior review meeting that we had. Excellent, clarified a lot of the questions and anticipated a lot of the questions that we may ask. And so I thought it was a very clear and succinct approach to this presentation and to where we are today. As far as speaking to many of the findings, I've read through the findings that have been identified to us as suggestions, and I've read through both 1 through 13 of those findings. And if appropriate, I would enter each one of these 13 findings into the body of record.
I think you're entitled to do that, Commissioner Strike, and I don't know that you could read them, or I think you could just incorporate them by reference, as you've done.
Incorporate by reference. And I'll also do as additional findings is that there was, this is as a public hearing, there was no public testimony for or against or written, and no telephonic testimony either.
Thank you, Commissioner Strike. I guess I'll just note briefly that I appreciate the process that's gone through with this. It's clearly kind of a challenging thing to try to get the factors right, and I'm hopeful that there's some success with this. We'll, it remains to be seen, but I appreciate the efforts of the planning department in response partly to our request to kind of go back and have further discussions and review and make some changes incorporating those additional feedback that was received by the public through that additional process. Okay, seeing nothing further, we'll go ahead and call the vote.
Ms. Krishna?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, 6 votes in favor, that motion passes. And that's the last item on our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Eber, seconded by Commissioner Strike. We are adjourned. Thank you.